I'm Jessica Anne Pressler, and you've tuned into Your Traitor Within, a podcast that exposes the brutal truths of healing, self-discovery, and breaking free from relentless patterns of self-sabotage. Welcome to Your Traitor Within podcast. I am thrilled to have Steve Hopper as our guest today. As a founder of Steve Hopper International, Steve has traveled across the United States and Canada delivering uplifting and empowering presentations to thousands of people. His audiences span corporate events, leadership and business conferences, personal development seminars, high schools, universities, churches, and correctional facilities. Steve's inspiring story has been featured on television, radio, and in numerous magazines and publications. As an author of From Prison to Purpose, he continues to transform lives through his remarkable personal story. Steve, thank you for joining us today to share your powerful story of Your Traitor Within.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jessica. I have been following you for quite some time, and I love all the stuff that you're putting out there. And I'm just honored and humbled to be on the show with you today.
And I am honored to have you because I do know a little bit of your story. And I'm so incredibly proud of the man you are, but of how you've helped so many people. And I know you will continue to do so. So, again, thank you for being here to tell your story.
No worries. Thank you. So yeah, the traitor within, huh? Wow. I guess for me, the traitor within began at a young age. My father was a very hard disciplinarian. When I say hard, I mean he was, took discipline to the level of abuse. I remember growing up, my dad used to always talk about how much he respected his father, and he would tell stories about the beatings that he would take from his dad. And obviously he thought that was, the way it was supposed to be, right? In the Bible, it says, he who spares the rod hates his child. Well, I don't think God was implying in that scripture to beat and abuse your children. But, my dad took that to the extreme. But the verbal was way more painful than the physical. I felt like I could never meet the mark. Like I was always falling short. I grew up playing football, and that's what I wanted to do in my life. And I was a good football player, and I excelled in the sport. And even, no matter how well I did on the field, it was always, well, you missed that tackle in the third quarter of the game, and so there was always just trying to satisfy him, trying to meet his, expectations, I guess you could say, and always falling short. And I had a mentor in my life that he talked about the difference. He talked about the lie identity, the my identity, and then the identity. And oh yeah, very powerful, very powerful. And so for me, I grew up at a very young age with this lie identity that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I was never going to meet the mark. I was never going to, reach that level of excellence in my life, no matter what, right? And so, long story short, at the age of 17 years old, a senior in high school with, again, all the opportunities in the world in front of me, I went to a keg party one night here in Tampa, Florida, on a private beach, and hundreds of teenagers drinking and partying and doing what we had no business doing. And at this party, a fight broke out between one of my friends and a teen from a rival high school, and it ended up being just this all-out brawl. And during that fight, I hit another teenager and seriously injured him. Matter of fact, he slipped into a coma after that fight. And for me, life changed in that moment. My dad turned me into the county jail, and sat there for 3 months my senior year in high school, waiting to find out if this young man was going to live or if he was going to die. And eventually, after about 90 days, he came out of the coma and he lived. But the state of Florida threw the book at me and sentenced me to 10 years in Florida State Prison. So at 17 years old, there was no, going to college, no playing football, none of that. I was going to the Florida State Penitentiary. And I share that with you to say that on that beach that night when I took that swing, there was a lot of anger behind that swing.
Mm-hmm.
Anger and hurt that I didn't even realize was there, and didn't realize until later on in life. But I was there. I was, like ready to go to the next level of my life, and I sabotaged it, to a great extent. And one of the reasons was because of that identity that I walked in, that
Mm-hmm.
I was never gonna make it. I was never gonna be good enough, and there was deep down inside, there was a frustration and an anger that just was there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And just want to say one thing, which
yeah,
I
yeah, absolutely.
probably know right now. That voice that you heard inside was your father's voice, and your father was never, and you were gonna still, you were gonna reach excellence. You just weren't reaching his excellence because he was never gonna let you get there.
Right.
So it doesn't, his whatever was going on with him and his stuff and whatever made him do what he did to you were going to reach excellence. You reached excellence. I've seen you reach
Yeah.
excellence. You weren't going to reach his, but that was impossible. He was always going to move that mark.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so that identity carried for quite some time in my life. I ended up going to prison, and I actually got saved in prison about a year into my incarceration. I was suicidal, contemplating taking my life, and God showed up that night, and I surrendered my life to Him, and it was a big game changer in my life. And I ended up doing 7 years on the 10-year sentence. And I'd love to tell you that I got out of prison and went out and lived this remarkable life without ever looking back. But I still had I still had the identity, and that I was, again, now it was even worse because, let's face it, in prison, you're not getting a lot of positive reinforcement about who you are and what you're
Right.
capable of doing. It was, you're scum of the earth, you're a menace to society, you're the worst of the worst, the lowest of the lowest. Now you've got this, you know, ex-convict, title,
Hmm.
hanging over you. And so I walked out of prison with an even worse identity than before I even went in. And you know, it led to, some additional failures. But one of the things that I did was I created this my identity
Hmm.
to overcome the lie identity.
So what is that?
I didn't want to be the person that wasn't good enough, right? I didn't want to be the person that wasn't meeting the mark. So I created a my identity, which was this guy that had it all together.
Okay.
I was polished. I had I had it all figured out, and and with that came this new level of pride, and a whole bunch of different stuff.
Hmm.
But underneath it all was this person who was never going to meet the mark.
Right.
And take it a step further, I ended up getting into a marriage with someone who was like my father. No
Hmm.
matter what I did, it was never going to it was never going to measure up. It was
Hmm.
never going to be enough. I was constantly, put down, told negative things about myself, and It just, so that identity was still there. My identity was still in place.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it was a pretty long, brutal, painful journey there for many years. Even after getting out of prison.
So a lot of external negative voices that you held onto internally.
Absolutely. And I'm a believer. I'm a Christian, and I do believe that there is a devil because I believe in God. I believe God's word. I believe there's a devil, right? And so, I also believe that that devil will speak to us as well, and wants us to believe that we're never gonna. He just takes the things that have taken place in our life, and he knows how to use them against us. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was just a so I had these external voices that were saying, you're not good enough, you're not this, you're not that, you're a fake, and or whatever, just all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
And you put that on top of already that internal belief that you're not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
It runs deep, right? It becomes
oh
part of
yeah,
it's part of who you are, these voices, even so it's not who you are, but the belief
right,
that that's who you are.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, one of the things I teach in my coaching business is that we take action based off of our belief.
Mm-hmm.
Our
Yes.
action is a result of our belief,
Mm-hmm.
and our circumstances are a result of our actions. And so if I believe I'm not good enough, I'm going to take action that's in alignment with not being good enough, which means that my circumstances, I'm never going to get to that place.
Right.
If I'm walking in the belief that I'm never going to get to that place, or that I'm not capable, or
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not worthy.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
When did you start? Because I know that you're at a different place now.
Oh, yeah.
How did that evolve?
Well, after, you know, my last marriage, which was, several separations over a course of several years. And, I couldn't walk away from that relationship because I've been told for so many years that I would never make it,
Mm-hmm.
that I would never be able to survive, and I would be, I would, whatever, right? And so there was so many negative things that were spoken over me, that I subconsciously I believed, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And here's this guy that survived prison, for God's sakes. I did 7 years in one of the most dangerous places on earth, and I couldn't walk away from this relationship. I was in bondage, uh,
Mm-hmm.
still, even
Mm-hmm.
after being freed from prison and whatever. I was in bondage. We had kids together and things like that, and obviously that was used as well, as a weapon. But I was in bondage. I couldn't get out. I didn't know how to break free. I was unhappy. I was miserable. I had completely lost all sense of who I was. And eventually, I finally reached a point, and God stepped into my life boldly and spoke to me, and He used different people and different situations, and to just speak to me and let me know that if I stayed where I was never, I received a message one day that told me if I stayed where I was,
Mm-hmm.
that I was going to die spiritually, emotionally, and eventually physically.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I felt like I was almost there at that moment in my life. And I finally got the courage to pull the trigger and be like, okay, I'm done with this. And it was brutal. I mean, the attacks came, and you know, everything that person had told me, about myself or what my life was, it looked like it was becoming reality. But God, God put people in my life that spoke life over me in that time, that combated all of the lies that have been spoken to me, saying things to me like, you're the head and not the tail, that God has a plan and a purpose for your life, and that I was worthy.
Mhm.
And it took a minute for it to sink in, especially when you've had so much of your life that you've been living this lie identity, this my identity. And it was based on that love and that guidance that I finally made a full surrender. I mentioned earlier, I surrendered my life to God in prison, but I didn't even know what that meant at that point in time. I didn't know who God was. I had not been discipled after I had surrendered my life to Him, and I hadn't read His Word, or understood His Word. I did read His Word, but didn't understand it. And um, I was guided to His Word at this point in my life, and I began to read what God said about me and who I was.
Mhm.
And it was complete opposite of everything that I had believed from my childhood, believed in adulthood. It was the complete opposite.
So imagine having to undo that, having to undo
Yeah,
that
yeah.
outer voice and the inner voice that has been, I mean, even rewiring your brain, if you want to get
Mhm.
physiological,
Oh yeah,
is
yeah,
a lot to do. It's hard.
yeah, absolutely. And it's been a process. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's absolutely 100% been a process, and still to this day, there is moments where I have to catch myself,
Mhm.
because I will be headed in a specific direction, and I will almost take my foot off the gas, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
right? And it's because that self-sabotage, that you're never going to make it, you're not worthy, you're not this, you're not that, and it's still, I mean, I've gone through some serious healing, Jess. Like I've had some moments where, I was on my knees crying, and asking God to take, those roots away from me, the roots that had, you know, taken root in my
Yes.
life, in my thought process, roots that had taken, grip in my heart. And so it's definitely been a journey of healing.
Mhm.
And, the beautiful thing about God is that, one of the things He told me when I was going through the really difficult time, was, I will restore everything that the enemy has stolen,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know? And, when you think about that, and just I know you've got a lot of different listeners from all walks of life. When we say the enemy, obviously we're talking about, Satan. But, you know, my whole life, I had so much stolen from me,
Yes.
you know,
I want to
taken
just
from me. Yeah.
your father and what he did, but I can't even imagine. And my heart goes out to you. 17 years old, going to jail. This is a period, and not fairly at all. You were a kid in a fight with a brawl. I mean,
Yeah.
from my perspective, you didn't deserve a day in jail, let alone
All right.
happen to you. And to take these years, these innocent, this time, and then being put in a situation with men, right? It was an adult jail.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can't,
Prison, full blown prison.
you were a child. You were still a child, 17, you're a
Yeah.
child. And to go what you went through, and of course with this voice inside of you, your father's voice, and then your your ex-wife's voice. And my heart really goes out to you, truly, to have to go and to be reinforced. I mean, it's almost like you didn't have a chance at that time to even like
Yeah.
climb out of it because you were constantly, hearing
Yeah,
it.
it's like, yeah, jumping out of the what is it, jumping out of the grease into the frying pan?
Yeah.
You know, that old Southern slang statement there. But yeah, it was well, and here's the thing is there's so many people like me
Yes.
that have gone through life without ever getting the healing that they need.
Mhm.
And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. We base our actions on our beliefs, and based on our actions we get our circumstances. And so I was going from one bad circumstance into another because of the belief, because the actions that I was taking based on my belief.
You put yourself in a situation that you weren't feeling good enough, so you found a person who was going to reinforce that and treat you like you weren't good enough.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much in a
Yeah.
nutshell. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, it was just, yeah, it's been a long journey of healing, and listen, I don't want to come on here and sound like a victim, because uh, you know, we allow, we can allow um, these things to, we have the power to fight these things, and we can allow it, to run and ruin our life. Um, and I did, I put myself in situations and allowed things to happen, uh, because I was living in this false identity, you know?
Well, but that knowledge, in my opinion, which is the traitor within, which is that inner voice that, told you you weren't good enough. And the first step is understanding what it is, what you're doing. And I think it's very empowering to understand
Yeah,
within because you can make a change. You can't change another person. You can't change your father. You can't make your father not say those things. But
right.
you can understand your inner voice, your traitor within, and make changes. And it's very empowering. Now, it's not easy. It's not easy
No,
to do all that. And like you said, sometimes it comes out. Like I don't think the traitor within ever goes away completely. I think it goes into a closet or under the bed or wherever it hides. But we get triggered. And when we're triggered, that potentially, the more healing we do, the less likely it's going to come out. But it does.
right.
So what do you do when that happens? You talked a little bit about that. Sometimes it does, that voice that creeps.
Yeah. So, as a believer,
Mhm.
I immediately, speak God's word over it, immediately. It really it really just immediately puts me back, in focus. The moment I start feeling something or whatever, I will, and this might sound crazy to some of your listeners, but I'll say, get behind me, Satan, in the name of Jesus, and just that statement alone, um, just gets me refocused and reminds me of who I am, which completely blocks out
Mhm.
who I was, you know? Yeah,
Well, you were always that wonderful person, but you had layers
right.
and layers and layers, which prevented you from getting there because you were told all those horrible things and believed all those horrible things. But
Yeah,
inside, that inner child, that wounded inner child, that's you. I mean,
yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
are
the Bible tells us that we're beautifully and wonderfully made. And so, you know, if we're beautifully and wonderfully made, then how do we go our lives feeling less than, feeling unworthy, And so you're right, from the beginning,
we?
I was wonderful,
Yes.
right? And I allowed different circumstances, different people, and it wasn't just my dad. It wasn't just, I mean, it's like there's so many things that happen to you in life. You start a business and that business fails, and there you go. Now you've just added some fuel to that I'm not good enough fire, and so there's a lot of things in life, circumstances, people speaking over you, so on and so forth, that can really help you to just stay in bondage
Yes,
to the traitor within.
that's right.
Yeah.
So if you would look back to your younger self when you were in the midst of this, what would you tell him?
I would I would tell him that no matter what is said,
Mhm.
no matter where you fall short,
Mhm.
that you have been created to play at an extremely high level. You've been gifted, and that God is going to guide you and protect you every step of the way, and that you need to walk in that power and that authority.
Mhm.
And when someone speaks negativity over you or someone does negative things to you, you shake it off and you keep moving in that power and that authority that you have.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those negative voices that they have said in the past is their stuff. It has nothing to do with you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, trust me. Through my healing process, I've come to the understanding that my dad, he had some major insecurity issues, and he had some, he had roots that had never been addressed or taken care of, and it wasn't just me, he was abusive to my mother and as well, and which was, just added, to the whole situation, but then I look at Mac's wife and realize that, she had some major, major insecurities as well that, caused her to be that person, that had to control everything and, had to, keep me in this little box, so that she could be elevated, and feel worthy herself. And, as I look back, I realized that most of the people that did speak negatively in my life,
Mhm.
they had their own issues
Right.
that they
You
were dealing with, not addressing, and that were, you
we can have
know,
passion for those people, but that doesn't mean we should have them in our lives if we can help it.
no, no, definitely.
Let them hurt us. Again,
Yeah,
there's reasons why people
definitely.
do what they do, but
Yeah, absolutely.
have compassion for ourselves not to, if we can, not to allow
Yeah,
it to happen.
yeah.
But life
You
is,
know,
we can't.
I I also think forgiveness is key.
Mhm.
I think that it's a must.
Mhm.
I believe that if you've been spoken over negatively, or someone has done something negative to you, or mistreated you in any way, shape, or form, that in order for you to be free from that fully, there's a forgiveness that has to take place.
Mhm.
You know, for me, a big forgiveness was allowing it.
Right.
I had to forgive myself
Mhm.
for just, one, not sticking up for myself, but for allowing myself to believe, that I was less than.
Have compassion for that part though, because your father is your father. You hear it from your
Right.
caregiver. How do you, it's hard not to take that in, you know?
Yeah.
So to have compassion for yourself. I don't know anyone that would have had that message given to them that wouldn't have gone down your path.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and then, of course, being reinforced. But even with our traitor within, to have compassion, to know that that's all it knew, you know, uh,
Yeah.
and to and you've learned from it, and so now you've taken this knowledge and you help other people. I know that you speak about, you tell your story, you've even gone to prisons, right? And you've gone to high schools and universities. What do you do? How do you do that? How do you teach others?
So, it's key that, obviously I share my testimony pretty much everywhere I go. And, anytime I speak, I'm sharing my story because, Jess, most people, and I say this with full knowledge and understanding of this because, I have a coaching business as well, so I'm coaching people, with our Kingdom Influencer program. And most people are walking around with these deep-seated roots in their lives that are, the word, for the purpose of the podcast, the traitor within is preventing them from stepping into the fullness, of and the abundant life that they could be living. And when I say abundant life, I don't mean, financially, yeah, that's definitely part of it, right? But it's joy, it's peace, it's like it's not happy, it's joy. There's a difference between being happy and having joy in your heart, right? And so most people that I come into contact with are not living in the fullness of peace and joy and abundance that they could in their life and love
Right.
because they're holding back
Mhm.
they're being held back from receiving that because of that traitor within,
Right.
and so, one of the things I talk about a lot when I go out and speak is, reminding people that, you were created to
Mhm.
play at a different level than you're playing at right now in your life. And I allude obviously to that joy and peace and abundance, but also I speak on, identity.
Mhm.
I talk about the lie identity, the my identity, and the true identity, and so it's really gotten a tremendous amount of positive feedback. People, one of the things about sharing our stories is that when we're authentic and real and we share our stories, it allows people to share theirs, and for the longest I didn't even tell, when I spoke, I didn't even talk about, the relationship with my dad. I really didn't talk about it,
Mhm.
you know and when I started talking about it, there would be people in the audience that would come up to me and be like, man, I had such a similar experience, with my dad growing up or with my mom growing up.
Mhm.
I didn't realize the impact that it had in my life. But
Mhm.
hearing your story, lets me know that, I'm holding on to some stuff that's holding me back,
Mhm.
you know?
And I think
And
you.
so,
Oh, sorry.
yeah. Yeah. And so like with Kingdom Influencer, one of the things, and I'm partnered with my wife, on Kingdom Influencer, my new wife, not the one I was talking about earlier, right? My new wife, Sylvia, amazing. She was one of those people that, as I was going through that situation, was one of the people that spoke life over me and, reminded me of who I truly was. And, but through Kingdom Influencer, one of the things that we do is we not only, address that identity, walk people through, how to step into that abundance, but, how to take their triumph story, their story of overcoming, and how to get that story out to the masses to impact and empower and,
And
help
take
other people. Yeah,
and take away the shame. To know that they're not
absolutely.
so you're telling the story that people know they're not alone. It validates their own story as well and takes away the shame
Yeah.
that it makes you feel part of a community.
Yeah.
Everything you're doing is amazing in helping others,
Oh, thanks.
truly, in so many ways.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Both of you. Good. You.
Yeah, my wife's she's pretty amazing. I'll tell you what, she's a huge supporter. And you know, when you have gone so long in your life
Mm-hmm.
hearing the negative,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're you're now in a situation where every day it's positive,
Mm-hmm.
and you just have someone just speaking like
Mm-hmm.
greatness into you. It's huge. So I encourage anybody listening. I mean, if you're not the person that is speaking life over the people in your life, then you need to change that now. You need to become the person that is speaking life, because it has an impact that is, you know, it has eternal significance in reality. It has eternal significance when you speak life into other people. And that's a whole nother podcast episode right there, is, being the person that is out there speaking life over people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
Yeah. And not the person feeding the traitor within them, you know?
and it gives meaning to what you've been through too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Wow. So before we end, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Oh man. I mean, I could sit here, Jess, and talk to you for hours about this subject and this topic. And, I would just say to anybody that's listening right now, if you're struggling, feeling less than, feeling unworthy, whether it's, from, failures that you've experienced in your life that have beat you down, or relationships that have beat you down, or, parents, things that were spoken over you, or, just, any and all the above, and you're feeling unworthy, you know, you were created uniquely
Mm-hmm.
with a plan and a purpose. You were beautifully and wonderfully made. You have your own unique fingerprint. Nobody else in the world has that fingerprint that you have. Even identical twins have different fingerprints. Um, you were uniquely made. You were uniquely created, and you weren't created to receive that traitor within, or to let that traitor within run your life any longer. And so if you're not feeling like you're walking in the abundance, if you're not walking in joy and peace and purpose and confidence in who you are and what you're bringing to the table for the world, then I just encourage you, um, address it immediately. Fight back, fight for your life, get a mentor, somebody in your life that's been through the fire, somebody that's got the scar, somebody that walks with a limp, somebody that's been through it, that can come alongside you, encourage you, and guide you. And then, of course, most importantly, if you want to know who you really are, and you want to know what your plan and purpose is, then go to the person that created you and created the plan and purpose for your life. And that's God.